All right. Welcome to NOAA Live. My name is Nicole Bartlett, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. This series is sponsored by NOAA's Regional Collaboration Network, where I work, which is spread across the country and helps connect people to all that NOAA does. It's also sponsored by Woods Hole Sea Grant, which is located at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution here on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. This series is designed to help you get to know NOAA and some of our incredible experts. All of our speakers work for some part of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Today, we're going to meet Anoushka Concepcion from Connecticut Sea Grant, which is based on the Yukon campus in Groton, Connecticut, and one of NOAA's valued partners, Holly Turner-Moore, a teacher at the Bridgeport Regional Vocational Aquaculture School in Bridgeport, Connecticut. While we'll be talking to you about kelp farming in coastal waters, we want to recognize that we are all coming to you from traditional lands of Native communities who have substantial traditional and local knowledge and much to share with us. We acknowledge that our speakers today are coming to us from the lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, and Paugussett people. We are hosting this webinar from the ancestral lands of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead Aquina. I also want to extend a special thanks to our American Sign Language interpreters, Crystal and Michael, who will be with us today. A few guidelines before I hand you over to our speaker. You are all muted because we have a lot of people on the line and we want to make sure everyone can hear our speaker. However, there is a box where you can write questions. Please find that now. Let us know if you're a class tuning in, and if there are multiple people watching, let us know who's asking the questions so we can give you a shout out. We encourage you to ask them as we go, and I will be keeping track for the speakers who will stop every now and then and answer a few. We may not get to all of your questions, but we're going to try to answer as many as we can. All right, Anoushka, I am turning them over to you.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thank you. Well, hi everyone, welcome and thank you for tuning in. As Nicole said, my name is Anoushka Concepcion, and I am an extension educator with the Connecticut Sea Grant program and University of Connecticut's Cooperative Extension System. I know that's a very long title, but I'll explain in a bit on what my job entails. But before I do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me, if that's okay. I was born in London, England, so I'm an immigrant to the United States. When my family came to the United States, we moved to New York City. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and it was really, I was definitely a city kid. I took the subway everywhere, so I didn't really have as much of an early exposure to marine science, except during trips to the aquarium with my class. Although I've always been interested in science, it was really marine science that I just thought was just the coolest thing, learning about all the animals that live in the ocean. And I really decided that this is what I wanted to do at a young age. And I went to the University of North Carolina at Wilmington to pursue my passion for marine biology and marine science. After graduating from UNC Wilmington, I took a trip with my parents to visit family in India. And it was in India I saw my first fish farm. And my dad said to me, this is what you should be doing with your degree in marine science: feeding people, teaching people how to grow healthy, nutritious, high quality protein and foods from the ocean, because it has a lot of nutrients and minerals that we don't find here on land. And I thought, wow, that actually makes sense. And that's really such a cool idea. And then I decided, yes, it just makes sense. It clicked. And I said, this is exactly what I want to do. So then if you look all the way down at the end of Florida, I was able to land a job at a shrimp hatchery in the Florida Keys. And that's really when I was exposed to farming and ocean farming and the hard work. It takes long hours, sometimes working 7 days a week. But really it was about the animals and providing food for the animals and watching them grow. And that was really, despite the hard work, it was really a rewarding experience. And I just fell in love even more with marine aquaculture. And just if you're not familiar with the term aquaculture, I forgot to mention, aquaculture is the farming of aquatic organisms. It can be done in freshwater or marine water, or I'm sorry, salt water. Oh, wrong way, sorry. And then I decided, after working at the shrimp hatchery that I wanted to pursue even more further studies in aquaculture. And so I went to the University of Rhode Island, where I got my master's degree in marine aquaculture. But interestingly enough, I couldn't find a job right away in aquaculture. But because I had such a strong foundation in the sciences and math, physics, chemistry, and biology, I was still able to land jobs in the sciences. So I worked for a pharmaceutical company for a few years before finding my dream job with Connecticut Sea Grant and University of Connecticut. So with Sea Grant, we are part of NOAA, as Nicole had mentioned, and we fund research, we do the outreach and extension of that research, and also have a marine education component. But it's really the outreach of the extension is what I do. And what I do is respond to stakeholder requests. What that means is different groups of people that I work with come to me with questions or needs. And sometimes those needs require, actually most of the time, those needs require information that's science-based, which is perfect for Sea Grants because we're all about the science. And so a lot of work I do is applied research. So it's not the traditional working in a lab, it's out on the water. So it's addressing a question and doing field work, collecting samples and analyzing those samples. So this project was a question that came from the state of Connecticut. It was regulators who are responsible. Their job is to ensure that all the food that we produce in the state is safe to eat, that no one gets sick from eating it. And it includes shellfish, fish, but also seaweeds. And because seaweed is a new crop for the United States that we're growing through aquaculture, there are a lot of unanswered questions. And so the regulators said, you know, we don't know what the parameters are. We don't know how, you know, if the seaweed is safe, should it be prepared a certain way to prevent someone from getting sick? We just didn't know. So then that's when I had the opportunity to design a research project and find farmers who we could partner with, work with the regulators, go out on the boats, put the kelp out, harvest the kelp and take water samples and tissue samples, analyze them, and then present the data. There's also a similar project with another type of species of seaweed. This here, I'm working with a student, a graduate student who also helped on the project. But a lot of work that I do also involves facilitation. And what that means is I bring different groups of people together to talk about, like in a meeting, to talk about problems and then find solutions. So in that picture where you see everyone is sitting down and listening to a speaker, that was a meeting that I organized for the Connecticut Chefs Association. These are chefs that work in restaurants, that are caterers, that work in hotels and prepare food. What they wanted to do was find sources of local seafood and seaweeds, but they didn't know where to start, so they called us. And so I thought it'd be a great idea just to introduce them to the farmers, let the chefs learn more about what kelp farming entails when the seaweed is available. We also had regulators participate in the meeting so that they can explain all the guidelines for food safety with seaweeds. So again, I love my job because there's so many different aspects to it and so many different ways that I get to help people. So I wanted to take a quick break here and see if anybody had any questions for me about me and my job.
Thanks, Anoushka. This is Nicole from the chat box. And yes, we do have a question from Lucas. He wants to know, how long have you worked at Connecticut Sea Grant?
Oh, I've worked at Connecticut Sea Grant for just over 10 years. So it's been, actually, no, exactly 10 years, yes. So it's been quite some time, and the projects that I've worked on varied from oysters and looking at food safety regulations with oysters, and it sort of morphed into focusing on seaweeds.
Great. And I know we're going to get to this a little bit later, but Michelle asks, what kind of seaweed is good to eat?
Oh, well, there are different species of seaweeds, over 100 different species, and most are edible. But I think it's important to have an understanding, depending upon the area that you live in, what is approved for human food. A lot of times you can find seaweeds already prepackaged. Those are good to go. If they're meant for food, you're fine eating them.
Gotcha. And then we also have a question from the Mass School in Sandy Hook. what is your favorite project that you've done?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was food safety research on a species of seaweeds called Gracilaria, which I'll show you a photo of in a minute. And it's just, one of the experiences being out on the boat, of course, it was in the summertime, which is when it grows, but you get all sorts of little critters that kind of hang out in the seaweed. And when you're picking through it, it's just really interesting to see all the different organisms that use the seaweed as a habitat.
See, that's why you're a biologist, because you find that interesting.
I think it's so cool.
All right, well, I'll let you continue. I'll hold off. Some of these other questions you're going to get to, so I'm going to hold.
Okay, great. All right, so let's jump right into it. So why are we talking about seaweeds? Well, actually, they're really, really cool organisms. So just to note, they are not plants. They're not like the plants that you see outside your window. They don't have a vascular system. They are called macroalgae. So we have microalgae, which are tiny microscopic unicellular organisms, but then there's also macroalgae, like the big kelp that I was holding up. So they have similar properties to traditional plants. For example, they photosynthesize, they require nutrients from the environment, very much like fertilizers. They do have similar structures, though they function in slightly a different way. So for example, this is that sugar kelp, and sugar kelp or seaweeds have what's called blade-like structures, which kind of look like leaves. There is something called a stipe, which kind of looks like a stem, and then this big chunky thing down here is called a holdfast. And so it kind of looks like roots, but it doesn't function in the same way. The holdfasts are meant to keep the seaweed put, so it kind of helps it stick to, for example, a rock or a wood piling, so that it doesn't float away, especially when it finds an area that it really likes to be in. So there are several types of seaweed, or 3 types of seaweeds. We have reds, browns, and greens. And the colors have to do with the type of photosynthetic pigments that each of these types of seaweeds have. And again, each type of seaweed can have hundreds of different species within those types. So seaweeds are really beneficial to the ecosystem. They provide a lot of functions. So what we call as ecosystem services, that's what seaweed provides. So for example, they're photosynthetic, right? Which means they remove carbon dioxide from the environment, but then they also produce oxygen. In addition to removing carbon dioxide, they remove nutrients like nitrogen, ammonia, and heavy metals, which they consider fertilizer. So that's great. We don't have to add anything to the environment. They just remove it all from the environment. So seaweeds also provide habitat, like hiding places for marine organisms. They provide breeding grounds as well as nursery grounds for juvenile finfish and other important organisms. They also provide food as well as food for animals as well as food for humans. Seaweeds are so versatile, and we'll go over or give you some examples in a minute of how they could be used. They can be used in a variety of different applications, which is really, really cool. And something else seaweeds contain are what we say anti-everything properties. So just to give you an example, there's some species, again, not all, but some species contain antioxidants. And I'm sure you've heard about it all on TV, antioxidant properties. So antioxidants remove the harmful oxidizing agents that's within our bodies that can cause aging and damage to our cells. So we take antioxidants through our food to help our bodies recover from all of these toxins that can enter our bodies. Some seaweeds also have anticoagulant properties. So they're called sort of blood thinners. So then they can help people or help the blood in our bodies move a little bit easier. Some seaweeds have anti-cancer properties, which a lot of research is being done to look at that. And as well as antiviral and antibacterial properties. So antiviral, antibacteria properties will prevent the growth of viruses and bacteria. So again, not all seaweeds can be used for the same thing, but some of them are pretty cool. And some of the applications for seaweeds, you'd never think about, but there's a lot of research going on with seaweeds. They're pretty awesome organisms. All right, so I have a quiz for all of you. I know it's after school, but I thought this would be fun exercise. So there's 4 images that you see on your screen. And I would like all of you to think about which of these products contain seaweed. And Nicole has more instructions on how you can answer that.
Sure. So thanks, Anoushka. This is Nicole. So all you have to do is there are numbers next to each one. So you see 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in the chat box, let me know what you think has seaweed in it from these choices. So right now I'm seeing Simon and Hannah and Katya all think toothpaste does. Jillian thinks that the chocolate milk does. Let's see, Laura also agrees with toothpaste. And Charlie says 1, 3, and 4. So we're getting a fruit pie guess. But I have to tell you, this is a pretty smart crowd, Anoushka. The majority of folks are guessing all of them, including our friend Texas and Colorado. So what do you think?
All right, so are you ready for the answer?
I am.
All right. For those of you who said they all contain seaweed components, I should say, yes, you're right, they all do. Some of these examples contain alginates and carrageenan, which acts as a thickening agent. So in addition to being used in toothpaste and ice cream, they could be used in other personal care products like shampoos as well. So good job, everybody. My kids wouldn't even know the answer, so good job. All right, so we talked about some of the uses for seaweeds. So I circled the 2 that we had mentioned before. So personal care products like shampoos and toothpaste, but also for food, and that's a picture of a seaweed salad. So there's research going on for other uses of seaweeds as well, such as biofuels over here, and then the picture in the middle, bioplastics, which is a really, really neat idea. All right, so I'll take a quick little break for questions.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Katya in Juneau wants to know, and this is a very specific question, I'm hoping you know what this means. Can you eat bull kelp? Have you heard of bull kelp?
Yes, I have heard of bull kelp. It doesn't grow in southern New England where I live, but yes, they grow bull kelp in Alaska, and I believe there's a species of bull kelp in Maine that grows naturally. And yes, you can eat it.
Great. And Carol in Kentucky asks, do the different colors of seaweed taste different?
That's a great question. I never really thought about it. The different colors, I actually don't know. I know just from tasting 2 species that we grow in Connecticut. One's a brown, which is sugar kelp, and one's a red, which is gracilaria. They taste very different, but I don't know if it's because they're different species of seaweeds and can be used and have different properties, or if it's because of their color pigments. So that's a really good question, but I don't know the answer.
Great. And then let's see, the other question I wanted to ask is, are all parts of the seaweed edible?
That I'm not so sure about. Our sugar kelp, except for the holdfasts, most of the parts of the sugar kelp is edible. And I believe my my co-speaker, Holly, can talk more about how the sugar kelps the components of the sugar kelps are used in food products.
Great. Okay, we've got another one final question about how long seaweed can grow, and I think you're going to talk about that in the next section, right? So you can either answer that or we can wait.
I'll go ahead and answer it now. So it depends upon the species of seaweeds. So in California, they have these huge kelp forests, which is a different type of kelp than the sugar kelp that we grow here on the East Coast. Those can grow, I think, over 60 meters, whereas our sugar kelp can grow to be about maybe 13 or 14 feet, so at the most. So it's going to depend upon the species.
All right, well, let's keep going then. Thanks, Anoushka.
Okay. So I'm not so sure if you were all aware, but people have been farming seaweed since the 1600s. And it was the Japanese that first, the Japanese eat seaweed as part of their diet pretty much every day. And it was the Japanese who first started this process. on their beaches, again, in the 1600s. So humans have had a long interaction with seaweeds pretty much from the very beginning. So we have a really long history of seaweed farming, and it's only really new to the United States as of maybe 15 years ago. So the two species of seaweeds that we grow in Connecticut is the brown seaweed sugar kelp called Saccharina latissima, and the red seaweed called Gracilaria tiquae. And the sugar kelp is a winter crop. So it grows in the fall. So it starts, a little juvenile baby kelp start growing in the fall, and then it's ready for harvest in the late spring. So about now is when some of the kelp farmers are going to start getting ready to harvest some of their kelp. The Gracilaria is a summer species, and for a variety of reasons, we are not growing in open water. If you remember that little story I told you about with all the little critters that are hiding in the Gracilaria, they also show up in the summertime. So we only grow Gracilaria in tanks. And actually, Holly can, if she has any photos later of the the Gracilaria is cultivated at the Bridgeport Aquaculture High School. So both are edible species, both are delicious. So those are the two species that we grow. So Holly's going to talk a little bit more in detail about how the kelp is produced, but this is just the quick basic overview of farming. We take the kelp from the reproductive tissue from the wild, we make seed string, and then once the seed string has been put out into the water over the growing season, this is again a picture of sugar kelp, it starts to grow. So it's a simple process, but a lot of research has been done to close the life cycle of sugar kelp. This is what the farm looks like underwater. So there's the line of kelp and connected to two buoys, and the whole farm system is anchored to the bottom. And as the kelp starts to grow, the line gets really heavy, and so we have to add more buoys to maintain it in the water column. And the reason why we have to maintain it in the water column is because, again, it photosynthesizes, right? And so we want to make sure that the kelp has access to enough sunlight in order to photosynthesize. And this is what it looks like from the top, from land. So the whole farm system is under the water. And it's not until you pull up a line at the bottom left picture here when you actually can see the kelp grow. Now, this can cause some issues. It can cause some problems because boaters, for example, wouldn't even know that there's anything under there or under the water surface unless they, didn't see the buoys. So there could be what we call user conflicts. So boats getting tangled into the lines. I'll just go back to the other picture. So we have a lot of lines, right? And so some of the concerns are when we're siting farms or trying to find a good place to put a kelp farm, for example, we have to be responsible and understand who else is using this waterway. So sometimes, it could be boaters, it could be commercial fishermen that can get caught in the lines, but there's also a concern with marine mammals and sea turtles. And the challenge there is sometimes sea turtles can get their flippers entangled into the lines and drown. And so it's very, very important to know that when you're going to start farming seaweed, you can't just do it anywhere. There's a whole process involved in identifying the best location so that there's minimal impact to the environment as well as being able to grow a new crop. So it may look simple, the process, but there's really, really a lot of thought that's put into starting a kelp farm. All right, I'll take another quick little break if anyone has any questions.
Let's see. I think the only question that we didn't get to before is how, I think you kind of talked about this in the seasonality, but how long can seaweed grow?
You mean the time frame?
Yeah, exactly.
So sugar kelp is a winter species. It doesn't like warm water, water that's too warm. So what happens and it has to do with the life cycle and understanding the life cycle of these different species. So when we deploy or we put out the juvenile sugar kelp in the fall, it kind of hangs out in the water, soaks up as much nutrients as possible, and then it overwinters under the water. And when the water temperature gets just right, about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts to grow. And as the water temperature increases to about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, it just takes off growing. But at a certain point, when you get to June and the water temperature gets close to 70, you can tell that the blades start to kind of bleach back a little bit and die back because the water temperature is just too warm. And by then, the reproductive tissue or the kelp grows back to a point where you really couldn't do anything with it, and it just waits for the water temperature to go back down again. So that's the seasonality of the sugar kelp. Gracilaria, similar process, but sort of opposite with the season. It likes warm water. It likes to grow it grows in the summertime, and in the winter, it sort of dies back and kind of not really hibernates, but waits for warmer temperatures to come back again.
Awesome. Thanks, Anoushka. I'm going to allow you to move on because I'm very excited to be inside of a school. I don't know about everybody else. Go ahead.
So I'm going to turn it over now to a colleague and project partner for many years. Excuse me. Her name is Holly Turner Moore. She is a teacher at the Bridgeport Aquaculture High School. She teaches aquaculture and marine science, and she's also one of the hatchery managers for the aquaculture program. So, Holly, it's all yours.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm excited to tell you all about what I do here at the Aquaculture School. So the Aquaculture School is one of 3 schools in Connecticut. We're very fortunate to have 3 schools that have a marine science, marine engineering, aquaculture focus. This one happens to be located in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And we have the fortunate instance of also having a floating classroom. So we have students that come here from 7 different towns. They come here just for their science and their technology, basically their STEM classes, and they're here for just a portion of the day. So they go back to their home schools for their traditional classes like their history and their English and some of their math classes. But they're here for all sorts of classes that revolve around a lot of the sciences, anywhere from biotechnology, boat building, marine mechanics, chemistry, physics, and Anoushka, if you would just change slides there, we'll talk about a little bit of those a little bit more in depth after. So I am actually from Connecticut. I was born and raised pretty much in Long Island Sound. Long Island Sound is an estuary that Connecticut is located closest to. And I really love Long Island Sound. I'm very passionate about the sound, but I actually had the fortunate chance of spending some time camping in the summers in a place called Wellfleet, which is out on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And Wellfleet has this really awesome marsh system that's full of terrapins and all sorts of different shellfish. You can see seals from there and sharks. And I think that really my passion for marine science kind of grew there. And I went off to the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina, also a beautiful coastal community to really get going in the marine sciences. From there, I got to work as a husbandry specialist at the Maritime Aquarium back here in Connecticut. And while working there, I spent a lot of time just really communicating with the public about all of the different animals and really realized that part of the thing that I really liked was teaching others about everything that I was so passionate about. So I was like, okay, well, let's become a teacher. And fortunately for me, here in Connecticut, we have these 3 schools where I can do both. So here at Aquaculture, I teach marine aquaculture and I teach marine ecology, and you can probably hear the noise in the background here, but I'm coming to you from our aquaculture laboratory. So the students here have the chance to work in the lab depending on what classes they're taking. And Anoushka, if you would change slides. And they also have the opportunity to do all sorts of other cool sciences. So you can see that some students are working under a hood and they're actually culturing bacteria. So if we have an issue here in the lab with one of our fish species that we're growing and we want to know what's going on with them, we can ask our students in our other classes to come in take a sample of what's growing on a fish and ask them to culture it and see if they can identify the species. And that way we can kind of determine what's going on and how to treat it. Some of the other students have the great opportunity of working in our marine construction and our CAD lab, where they can design boats and sometimes sailboats, paddleboards, and things like that. Our upperclassmen, our juniors and seniors, have the chance to build these cocktail class racers, which are pictured in the middle picture here. And the cocktail class racers are just basically wooden boats. They're hand built by the students. And at the end of each year, kind of our closure, it's almost like of our graduation, we have the Aqua Cup, where the students get to race the boats around in the harbor and hopes to win the coveted Aqua Cup. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great day here to kind of close out our school year. We also have access to some farm grounds here on Long Island Sound. Growing oysters and clams is also a big industry here in the Sound. So the students get the opportunity to help to farm oysters and clams. And then again, here in the hatchery, we're working on a variety of different projects. Some of the projects that are going on behind me are independent research projects by our seniors. You might see a small dogfish shark pop up behind me. One of the students is doing some behavioral research with them. We also do manage a lobster hatchery, so you can see in the images on the bottom 3 different stages of lobsters. So the lobsters hatch out here. We grow them out to adult size. Some of them stay, some of them we get permits to release into Long Island Sound. We also have kind of traditional science classes here, like chemistry and physics, and we try and relate those a bit into that marine theme or that aquaculture theme. And there's some other technology classes like ocean robotics and conceptual physics, where they're building underwater ROVs or taking our ROV out underwater and exploring some of the natural habitats here in Long Island Sound. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we do here is we help out with this Kelp project. So about 10 or 11 years ago, we had some local scientists and students come to us, come to myself and my students here at the school and say, hey, you guys have this great experimental farm site. You have the facilities to manage and maintain cultures. Would you help us kind of figure this out? So we worked with these local scientists and these local students to kind of sort out all of the ins and outs of growing kelp and farming kelp here in Long Island Sound. So if you were going to grow something, I'm going to throw it back to the audience here. If you were going to grow something, what are some things that you would want to know about before you started?
Okay, everybody, this is Nicole from the chat box. So let's see, what would you need if you were going to grow something? So what are some of the things what do you need to know about what you're growing, and what do you need to grow something? So let's see, Hannah guesses, she says, what does it need to grow? So what, food or conditions. Simon adds, how long is their lifespan? Texas says, if it will grow where you live, like, is it going to work there? Quinn says you need seeds, or some sort of starting point or egg to start with. Let's see, Lucas says you need space, which is true. Michelle says, what kind of soil does it need? So a lot about what conditions, whatever you're growing. And Eve adds, oh, I'm sorry, that's Jasper, says temperature and light. And Brian adds oxygen and water flow, maybe salinity. Good guesses?
Those are all great guesses. So you're absolutely right. We need to know about life cycle. We need to know about habitat. We need to know about the growing conditions. And I loved the one about the seeds, because that's where we're going to start. So you have to have a starting point to grow anything, right? And so basically what happens here is that some of the local farmers or some of the local scientists will bring us kelp. And you can see in the middle picture there is a brown kelp that has a darker band down the middle. And this is what we would refer to as reproductive kelp. So folks that are out in the field, The farmers, the scientists will bring that here to myself and my students in the lab. And what we will do is we'll actually take that kelp, we'll wash it down really well to get rid of all those critters that Anoushka was talking about earlier, because we don't want to culture them as well. So we'll wash down the kelp, and what we'll do is we'll cut out that dark band in the middle. It's called sorus tissue. And the sorus tissue is where all the kelp spores are. It's like the seed for the kelp. And you can see in the image next to it, what we'll do is we'll actually dry it out in paper towel, just usually about 24 hours. So the kids cut out the sorus tissue, we rinse everything down, we transfer it to paper towels, and we refrigerate it overnight. And if the paper towel looks like that one does in the morning, where it's got the sorus material, the reproductive material stuck to it, we know we're doing a great job. And what we'll do is we'll take those sorus tissue pieces and we'll then immerse them in some sterile seawater. And we let them kind of sit and hang out in the sterile seawater for a little while. We stir them, and as it kind of warms up and becomes room temperature, it'll start to release more of basically the seed or the spores. And what we have to do then is we have to figure out, well, now we've got to take those spores and we've got to, or those baby kelp at this point, and we've got to get them attached to something so that we can farm them. So what we do is we take little tiny, it's almost like kite string, and we wind it around a PVC or a plastic pipe. And we take that setup and we immerse it in the water where all of the baby kelp are now hanging out and floating around. And what they'll do is they'll actually attach themselves onto this seed string line, and then we culture them in the lab. So they hang out here for usually about a month, sometimes like 6 weeks, depends on conditions outside, because as Anoushka said, we want to grow them in the winter. So we usually wait for those conditions to kind of change outside. And when we're culturing them here in the lab, it's exactly what you guys said. We have to make sure we maintain the salinity of the water. We have to keep an eye on making sure they have the appropriate light levels. We have to make sure that we water change the water and provide them with fertilizers and nutrients and things like that. And then next slide. So you can see we'll then deploy the seed string out onto our farm site. So you can see that kite string kind of winding around a larger line. And that's what Anoushka had shown you. That's line that is strung between buoys and then usually drop down to about 1 meter. So it's below the surface. And up in the top left corner, you can see a little tiny piece of kelp growing. That's usually about 2 months of growth. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot. So when we first put things out in the winter, it's a little nerve-wracking because you go back after 2 months of waiting on this crop and you have this teeny tiny little crop and you get a little bit worried. But what happens is as we transition through the winter and our days start to get a little bit longer and the water starts to warm up just a little bit, we start to see that growth rate increase. So usually between like February, March, and April, we have a lot of growth happening. And by the time we get around to our harvest time in May and June, we usually have anywhere from like 1.5 meters to 2 meters of kelp. And you can't see it in that right-hand picture because it's below the surface of the water. And so it's growing down below those buoys where it's getting all of the nutrients that it needs. It's high enough in the water column where it's still getting the light and it's still enjoying the temperature of the water. If we wait too late to harvest, it will break down just like Anoushka had said. So late May, early June, just before all the boating starts to kind of vamp up here in Long Island Sound, we get the kelp out of the water. So the students go out with myself and some of our captains, and we harvest the line. We usually take in about a 10-meter line at a time, and we either pull or we cut the kelp off of the line. Now at this point, the holdfasts are kind of like grabbing onto the line, so it can be kind of a tough job. And we then transfer all of that kelp into coolers, and then we come back to the school. And the great thing is that this is kind of like a community effort at the school. The teachers get involved, all the students get involved. Most of the time we're processing anywhere from like 300 to 400 pounds of kelp at a time. And it all has to be, in order to process it to become a food source, we have to basically follow safety protocol. So we bring it in, we wash it down, as you can see some of the students are doing. We cut off any of the material that's kind of degraded. we separate the stipe of the kelp, which is almost like a little stem. And those stipes are actually really great to eat. They taste like a pickle almost, but they're just really thin. So we separate those from the blades. And then the students will transfer the blade, which is the main body of the kelp that we eat, into a pot of boiling water where it gets blanched. So the blanching process takes that brown kelp into like this really cool green color, and the water left behind is a really cool color. And sometimes we'll actually do some tie-dyeing with the leftover pigments in that water. And after everything is blanched, it will then get chilled back down and packaged and ready to go to market. And the other cool thing about our school is that we have our own market. We have our own seafood market here. So we can package it and we sell it out of our student-run market. The students get safety training. They get serve safe training, which helps them to work in the restaurant industry. And the rest of the kelp will actually go back to some of the local farmers to sell at their markets as well. One of the other things that we do towards the end of the year is that we have a chef event. So we invite a popular local chef to come in and cook some of the things that we grow either here in the lab or we harvest out from our farm site. So oysters or clams or kelp, and then we serve it up. So the students learn to work with the chef, they learn how to prepare the material, to act as sous chefs, and then they help to serve it out at the restaurant that night as well. So the other kind of fun and quirky thing that we do is when we're out on the boat for the entire day harvesting kelp, it can be kind of a long day, kind of a bit of hard work. So we end up getting a little bit goofy, and what you can see here is the back of a t-shirt that we made, because we come up with all sorts of weird jokes and puns that are kind of revolve around seaweeds and around kelp. So can I kelp you? Does anybody have any questions?
I love it, Holly. You guys can use that one. You can make a joke out of that. You know, what did the kelp say to the customer? Can I kelp you? So thanks, Holly. That was really interesting. A couple of questions that we've gotten already. You did mention that you can pickle kelp, right?
You can, yes. Yeah. So just like you're pickling cucumbers in a jar, you can pickle them in a ball jar as well, or have pickled stipe, which is just a portion of the kelp.
So I got another question from Carmen. She wants to know, do you work the whole year, or do you just work a school year like a regular teacher would?
Well, that's where my job is a little bit different, because myself and the other hatchery manager have to take care of everything here all year. So she and I are here 12 months of the year, but in the summertime, students actually are hired on and they get paid to work in the lab as well. So they get a little bit of extra training, and they're working here as hatchery managers as well.
That's awesome. So Karen is asking if this is something that could be replicated in Northwest California. Have you seen pools like yours in other parts of the country?
We are starting to see more and more interest. So we have had some visitors from some other areas that have just come by and asked a lot of questions and talked about programs like ours. There are some other programs that are similar, but none that are high schools like we see here in Connecticut.
Gotcha. Okay, if you want to come back on, Anoushka, I saw you appear for a second. I think some of these other questions are going to be covered in this next session that you guys are going to use to wrap up. So we're just going to go for a few more minutes. So if you can bear with us.
Yeah, sorry, we're going to be really quick. I just realized that we're a bit over, so sorry about that. But I just wanted to quickly just give you an idea of, so we talked about growing the kelp, but now what do we do with it? What's happening with seaweeds? A lot of chefs are really interested in cooking with seaweeds because it's very nutritious, it's very healthy. And so this is one chef that I've known for many years. His name is Chef Ken Bergeron. He's been cooking with different species of seaweeds for more than 40 years. And he has cookbooks that he's written. But what he's trying to do is get seaweed into restaurants and teach other chefs how to cook with seaweeds, or our local seaweeds specifically, so that all of you can eventually start eating seaweed. So what I would like to ask all of you to do is, when it's safe, of course, when you go to the restaurant with your parents, if you see seaweed on the menu, try it and let us know what you think. Because again, it's very healthy and it's pretty good. But also some of the other research that's been going on for how we can use seaweed beyond just food. A lot of researchers are interested in looking or using seaweeds for bioextraction. What that means is clearing up coastal waterways and improving water quality, because seaweeds are really great at taking up nutrients, right? So just one quick example, being in Connecticut, we have quite a few rivers, but one is the Connecticut River. And the Connecticut River goes all the way up pretty much into Canada. And so that's called the watershed. And so all the people living in the watershed, all the nutrients from their lawns and just trash, everything ends up in the river, and it goes all into Long Island Sound. So, you know, that kind of can degrade water quality if it's not being monitored or cleaned up in a way. And so researchers are thinking, well, why don't we use seaweed as a way to help clean up coastal waterways and improve water quality so that animals have a place, you know, are comfortable staying in the, or need clean water. And even oyster farmers and clam farmers really need clean water in order to grow their crop. Another really cool idea and research area that I'd mentioned before was bioplastics, and using seaweeds to make bioplastics to help reduce our plastic waste. And the great thing about bioplastics is they can biodegrade a lot quicker than regular plastics can. So they're not sitting in a landfill for many, many years. But how cool would it be going to the grocery store or going to any store and picking up a plastic bag and knowing that that's been made out of seaweed and it's going to biodegrade a lot quicker than a plastic bag would. So it helps reduce trash even going into the ocean. So I'm really excited about that potential outcome of using seaweeds. We also wanted to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to point out as well that when we talk about careers and we talk about seaweed, that there's also all sorts of other careers that are kind of revolve around aquaculture. So you can clearly see that behind me there, we definitely need plumbers, we need electricians, we need mechanics. So there's all sorts of great careers that kind of are involved and engaged in aquaculture as well.
Yeah, so just some photos of regulators, people who go out and take water samples. The aquaculture industry depends upon them, in addition to farmers and researchers, and of course, as Holly mentioned, electricians and plumbers, and even science communicators. So there's a lot of opportunity for jobs in the aquaculture or associated fields. And I think Holly and I wanted to close on just, you know, thanking you for your time, but we love seaweeds and we think that they're just the coolest organisms on the planet. And we hope that, you know, after this presentation, you can see all the potential uses of seaweeds and how awesome seaweeds are, and that they're more than just the slimy, smelly things that end up on the beach after a rainstorm or a thunderstorm. So anyway, thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you guys. This was really interesting. I can't wait to go out to eat again and see if I see seaweed on the menu. I've had it, you know, I used to live in Hawaii, so seaweed is very common on the menu out there, but I don't see it quite as often here on Cape Cod. So I'm excited to see that in New England. I did have one question about, you mentioned the lines and the rope lines in your the different farms. Do you, a couple people wanted to know whether right whales are impacted by those lines at all, or if this is close enough to shore that that doesn't impact them. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, so that is a concern. And then that's going to determine where we can put seaweed farms. So scientists know the general migration routes for right whales and where they show up. So that's immediately going to restrict where a seaweed farm can be put because of the potential for entanglements. So again, that's part of the process of figuring out where the best places to grow seaweed would be.
Gotcha. And one final question, we've gotten it from a few of our regulars. So I got to ask Holly, what is your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of the job, let's see, it's probably just kind of seeing the wonder in the students' faces. You know, when they see something or they hold something for the first time, and you can kind of almost see them starting to develop questions and investigate and see their passion growing. So I think it's always fun to see them kind of realize that this is the cool thing and this is what they want to do. They want to know more about it.
I just like to add, I wish I had a teacher like Holly when I was in high school. She has the coolest job.
Yeah, she does have a great job. And I can just all the activities, I mean, even just being outside on a boat as part of school, that would have been fantastic. We didn't have that in Pennsylvania where I grew up. So Anoushka, to you, what's your favorite part of your job?
Oh, it's getting to work with people. I just work with so many different folks that getting to know them and helping them in any way I can, and having them come back to me and saying thank you. I have a better understanding of now of what I'm getting into. I never thought this was something I could do, but you know, it's really great knowing that just even a phone conversation can either open people's minds to the possibilities or just even help them answer a question that's been bugging them.
Yeah, you seem like a really good problem solver, someone that would be help a lot of people out. So that's got to be very satisfying. We have had people ask about volunteer opportunities. So Anoushka's contact information is on the Connecticut Sea Grant website if you want to reach out to her and find out more about that if you're local to Connecticut. And Holly, does anyone volunteer in connection with your school?
Usually the volunteers here are students. They come back to volunteer in the hatchery, but our school also collaborates with some other water quality sampling programs around. So people are welcome to contact me, and I can put them in contact with those opportunities.
Great. Well, everyone, the resources listed under the webinar are available to you, as well as this webinar will be recorded, captioned, translated into Spanish, and also posted on our archive so that you can share this with folks who maybe couldn't make it today or go back and re-hear some of the stuff that we covered. We also, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Michael and Crystal, our interpreters, our American Sign Language interpreters, as well as the both of you for taking the time to be with us today. It was really cool to learn about kelp farming in Connecticut. And just to give everyone a heads up for next week, we are going to the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary to talk about Texas corals. So that is going to be exciting. So we hope you can make it. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thanks.